The Recovery Kernel. Stop the Bleed. The Counterintuitive Recovery Guide. On Pharmaceutical Replacement Group Meeting Culture, the Phase Reframe, Pure Contagion, the Simple Human Fix. What this guide is and is not. Classical Building the Centurian, this guide does not tell you to stop your medication. It tells you to set a date. This guide is not anti-medicine. Medication-assisted treatment saves lives in opioid withdrawal. Antidepressants provide a functional floor while the natural architecture is being built. Naltrexone reduces craving in the early high-risk period. These are real tools with real evidence. What this guide examines is the specific pattern where the medical intervention that was designed to be a bridge becomes the destination, where we'll reassess in 3 months becomes 3 years of refills, where the group attendance that was supposed to provide community becomes an obligation that produces nothing but guilt for missing it, where the pharmaceutical that replaced the substance creates a new supply chain with a new regular payment and a new monthly pickup. The question this guide asks about every recovery intervention, pharmaceutical, group, therapeutic, supplemental, is the same question: is this transitive, building towards something that doesn't require it, with a defined endpoint? Or has the scaffolding become the building? Warning: if you are currently in medical treatment for substance withdrawal, especially opioid, benzodiazepine, or alcohol withdrawal, do not adjust any medication without physician guidance. Withdrawal from these substances can be medically dangerous. This guide is about the long arc of recovery infrastructure, not acute withdrawal management. Section 1, Pharmaceutical Replacement, one dealer structure or another. Classical Building the Centurian, the insurance company is the new wholesaler. The pharmacy is the new corner. The prescription is the new permission slip. This is a structural observation, not a moral judgment. The pharmaceutical supply chain for recovery medications has the same architecture as any other supply chain, including the one that supplied the substance. This structural parallel does not make pharmaceuticals bad. It makes them something to examine with the same clarity that was eventually applied to the substance. What is this doing? For how long? Is there an exit? Is the exit plan specific and dated? Or is "we'll see how it goes" the actual answer? 1.1, the transitive model, setting the exit plan on day 1. The question to ask your prescriber on the first day of any recovery medication is not, will this help? It is, what is the end point of this medication, and how will we know when we've reached it? A prescriber who cannot answer this question specifically is offering management rather than treatment. Management is valid, some conditions require ongoing management. But the person who was told, this is for the acute phase while you stabilize, will taper at 90 days, and the person who was told nothing and is still refilling 5 years later have had different conversations with their doctors. Make sure you have had the specific one. White heavy checkmark Sanctuary, the Recovery Kernel Supplement Stack, 5-MTHF, methylcobalamin, NAC, magnesium glycinate, omega-3 DHA, P5P, R5P, calcium glycinate, specifically targets the same neurological systems that recovery pharmaceuticals address, through the alternative synthesis pathways. They are not a substitute for necessary pharmaceutical intervention. They are what makes the pharmaceutical intervention genuinely transitive by building the biological capacity that allows the taper. 1.2, once you identify the structures, you most likely do not need the medication. The full inventory guide in this series provides the cognitive testing battery, the substance-specific damage profile, and the domain scoring. When that inventory is complete, when the specific damaged structures are identified and the specific repair protocols are underway, the pharmacological supplementation need often dramatically reduces. The depression that looked like major depressive disorder in month 1 is the dopamine and serotonin system depleted by the substance. The anxiety that looked like generalized anxiety disorder is the GABA-B receptor desensitization from GHB or benzo use, or the HPA axis dysregulation from stimulants. The insomnia is the disrupted sleep architecture from stimulant and opioid use. These are specific and bounded pharmacological consequences, not permanent conditions, and most of them resolve with the specific supplement stack, the exercise protocol, the sleep hygiene architecture, and time. The person who is told, you have treatment-resistant depression and will need medication indefinitely, and who actually has MTHFR-C677T homozygous plus depleted methylation cycle from years of alcohol use plus number 5 MTHF in their protocol does not have treatment-resistant depression. They have an untreated genetic methylation deficit that is preventing the neurotransmitter synthesis that would resolve the depression. That is a fixable biochemical problem, not a permanent condition requiring lifelong SSRI. Section 2, Your Fix from Other Things, the simplest pharmacology available. Classical building the Centurion, go bowling. Go walking. Pick flowers from a field. Make a snow angel. These are not cute suggestions. They are clinical interventions. The instinct when hearing go bowling or make a snow angel in a recovery guide is to dismiss it as motivational poster material, the generic good advice that doesn't address the specific weight of what is being recovered from. This section provides the pharmacological justification for why the simplest, most embodied, most kinetic activities are among the most powerful recovery interventions available. Not metaphorically. Biochemically. 2.1, Walking, the most underrated pharmaceutical. 20 to 30 minutes of walking at a comfortable pace produces. Prescription, 30 minutes of walking daily. Not as exercise primarily, as pharmacology. The dose is 30 minutes. It is not optional in the first 90 days of recovery any more than the supplement stack is optional. It produces specific, documented neurological effects that support the recovery architecture. 2.2, Bowling, darts, mini golf, the goal-directed reward loop. This is not as silly as it sounds. The specific pharmacological profile of goal-directed activities with immediate visible feedback is the same profile that the substance was approximating through a much more expensive and damaging mechanism. 2.3, Picking flowers from a field / making a snow angel, the kinesthetic presence practice. These are not whimsical. They are specific and named because they share a pharmacological quality that distinguishes them from most other activities. They require complete sensory presence in the body at the exact moment of the activity. You cannot pick flowers from a field while ruminating about the past or planning the future. The activity's physical specificity, this flower, not that one, the texture of this stem, the way the cold air hits the ground, the exact pressure needed to make the arm sweep, pulls the entire nervous system into the present moment. This is what high-quality meditation aims to produce. It is what ketamine's dissociation removes by force. It is what the substance often provided by the same forced removal. The kinesthetic presence activity produces genuine present-moment sensory engagement through a mechanism that costs nothing, requires no chemistry, and produces no crash. Classical building the Centurion, go bowling. Go walking. Pick flowers in a field. Make a snow angel. These are prescriptions. Their mechanism is real. Their cost is zero. Their side effect profile is exclusively positive. Take them seriously. Section 3, Group Attendance, permission to stop if it isn't working. Classical building the Centurion, you'll succeed, just keep attending is only true if attendance is producing something. Group attendance, whether AA/NA meetings, smart recovery groups, treatment center groups, or other peer recovery support, is genuinely beneficial for many people in recovery. The social connection, the shared experience, the structure of regular attendance, the accountability, these are real benefits that produce real recovery outcomes for the right people in the right groups at the right time. This section is not about those groups. This section is about the group that is not working, that leaves you feeling worse, more like a victim, less capable of the journey, more focused on the starting pit than the destination, and for which you have been told that continued attendance is the path. Permission, you are allowed to stop attending a group that is not helping you. 3.1, When group attendance is counterproductive. 3.2, The peer contagion research. The clinical literature has documented what practitioners sometimes call deviancy training, the phenomenon where putting high-risk individuals in peer groups with similar high-risk peers can increase the risk behaviors through peer reinforcement mechanisms. The research, developed primarily in adolescent treatment settings but applicable to adult recovery contexts, describes individuals in peer groups model and reinforce each other's risk behaviors and risk identities, not intentionally, but through the normal social dynamics of group cohesion around shared identity. The nearest example, effect, the person who is 30 days abstinent and whose immediate social reference group consists of people who relapsed at 25 days has that relapse as their most available social example of what happens, rather than the 5-year recovery as their reference point. Shared suffering as bonding mechanism. Groups that cohere around collective suffering produce strong social bonds around the suffering itself. The shared identity of, we all struggle, can become an obstacle to the identity of, we are building something different. Competitive victimhood. In some group dynamics, the competition for the most difficult story or the most sympathetic suffering produces a reinforcement of suffering identity rather than capacity identity. The research implication, groups of people who are all freshly off substances, whose nearest examples of recovery are each other, and whose bonding mechanism is shared suffering can, in specific group dynamics, inhibit recovery more than they support it. This is not always true. It depends on the group facilitator, the group norms, and the composition. But it is a real risk worth examining honestly. 3.3 What actually works in groups. When group formats work for recovery, they typically have these features that the counterproductive format lacks. Heterogeneous stages of recovery. People at very different distances from the substance provide aspirational reference points rather than mutual reinforcement of the starting position. Skill-focused content. The group is practicing specific skills, coping strategies, communication skills, emotional regulation techniques, rather than primarily processing experiences. Future orientation. The group's primary question is, what are we building rather than, what happened to us? Strong facilitation. A skilled facilitator who actively redirects victim identity reinforcement and maintains forward-moving group norms. Identity expansion. The group explicitly supports multiple aspects of participants' identities rather than organizing primarily around the addiction identity. Permission. If the group you attend has none of these features and is producing the counterproductive outcomes described above, you are allowed to leave. This is not giving up on recovery. It is recognizing that a specific tool is not the right tool for your specific situation at this specific time. Section 4, the phase reframe and weaponization. Classical building the Centurian. A phase is something you went through, not something you are. The conventional recovery identity is built around the substance. I am an addict. I am in recovery. I am a person with a substance use disorder. All of these locate the substance at the center of the identity. The phase reframe proposes a different structure. The addiction was a phase of your life, significant, costly, instructive, and now behind you. You went through it. You are not it. 4.1 What phase does to identity. 4.2 The weaponization, integrating the phase's power. J.R. Tolkien's specific insight. When you walk away from the phase, it becomes a weapon. Not a wound to manage. A weapon to wield. The integration of the phase's lessons into practical capability. What the phase produced that is genuinely weaponizable. Classical building the Centurian, the phase produced real things. Costly things. But real. The weaponization is the decision to treat those real things as instruments rather than as evidence of damage. The pharmacological knowledge is a tool. The resilience is a tool. The understanding of vulnerability is a tool. Use them. Section 5, the peer contagion problem, closer to the addiction than the destination. Classical building the Centurian, the people who are most like where you were are not the best map to where you are going. This is the most direct observation in this guide and the one most likely to feel like a betrayal of recovery culture. It is not. It is a careful distinction between the peer relationships that support recovery and the specific dynamic that can impede it. 5.1 The Endless Pit of Pity and Doubt. Fresh-off substance people who are placed in close community with other fresh-off substance people create a specific social dynamic that has a consistent, recognizable pattern. The shared identity is, we are people who were harmed by substances. This is accurate. It is also a ceiling. The shared identity that coalesces the group is the thing being recovered from, not the destination being recovered toward. The mutual confirmation of victimhood, yes, it was done to us. Yes, we were powerless. Yes, we suffer. This is compassionate in intent. In practice, the repeated confirmation of victim identity deepens the victim identity rather than resolving it. The compassion becomes the problem. The competitive suffering escalation, whose story is more severe? Whose suffering is more legitimate? The person whose suffering is most extreme receives the most attention. This creates an incentive structure that rewards the performance and retention of suffering. The collective near future, we are all right at the edge of relapse. Any of us could fall back at any moment. This framing keeps the group's shared consciousness located at the edge of the pit rather than at the horizon of the destination. The relapse is always the nearest available reference point because the nearest members of the community are closest to it. The mutual conviction that the journey is too hard, they don't understand how hard this is. Only we understand. This creates a boundary between the group, who understand the difficulty, and the outside world, who don't. The group becomes the only valid community, which means the group that is closest to the addiction becomes the entire social world. 5.2 The Authoritative Destination. The authoritative destination is the specific, positive, concrete description of where the recovery is going. Not using. Not stable. Not managing. Something real and specific, the person with the rebuilt relationship, the career rebuilt from new foundations, the garden producing food, the animal that needs them, the cognitive function restored to the point where the skills they always had can now express fully. The trek toward the authoritative destination seems unworthy when the group is making the pit more vivid than the destination. The pit is real. It is also where you were, not where you are going. The people in the pit are real. They are also the nearest examples of where you were, not the nearest examples of where you are going. 5.3 How to restructure the social world. This does not require abandoning the people who are in the pit. It requires expanding the social world to include people who are not. Specifically, find one person, who has done the thing you are trying to do. Who went through a substance use problem and built something meaningful on the other side. This person's existence is the primary piece of evidence that the destination is real and reachable. Find them. Listen to them more than you listen to the collective suffering of the group. Bring the recovery infrastructure into non-recovery contexts. The transplantation targets, the garden, the animal, the brewing, the training, introduce you to communities of people who know you primarily as a person who grows things, or tends an animal, or brews beer, or lifts weights. These communities know you as you are becoming, not as what you were. Consume the destination, not just the process. Recovery memoirs from people who have built extraordinary lives after profound addiction, not just I am in recovery, but this is what I built. The literature, the stories, the public figures who have named and moved beyond the phase. These are the reference points to fill the social imagination with. Be honest about the group dynamic. If the group is producing the pit dynamic, if you leave each meeting more mired in victimhood than when you arrived, name this to yourself and then act on the information. Permission was granted in Section 3. Use it. Section 6, The Simple Things, What Gets Restored When the Substance Leaves. Classical building the Centurian, the snow angel is not a recovery technique. It is what you can do again when the recovery is working. The bowling, the walking, the flowers from a field, the snow angel, these are not the tools of the recovery. They are the evidence of it. They are what becomes possible again when the biological repair has proceeded far enough that the simple pleasures of an embodied life are accessible. The person who cannot make a snow angel, not physically, but experientially, who lies in the snow and feels nothing, who cannot access the spontaneous delight that the activity is supposed to produce, is not recovered yet. The recovery's most important marker is not the absence of the substance. It is the return of capacity for ordinary delight. 6.1 The return of simple pleasure as recovery marker. Classical building the Centurian, the snow angel is not a recovery technique. It is a recovery test. When you can make one and feel the thing you felt making snow angels before the substance became the center of your world, something specific and good has returned. That is worth more than any self-report scale. Stop the bleed, the summary. Classical building the Centurian, what is transitive? What is active? What is done? What you can do right now. Recovery Kernel Stop the Bleed Crisis, 988 SAMHSA, 1-800-662-4357. Read with, amends to self the full inventory the transplant the chrysalis. The trek is worthy. Keep the destination visible.